Hi, so we are going to talk about asynchronous JavaScript. Now, talking about asynchronous JavaScript, let's talk about JavaScript features first. Okay, so JavaScript is considered to be a synchronous language. JavaScript is a synchronous language. Okay, now what do we mean by synchronous language? Let's see that. Any programming language, let be it JavaScript, if we want to run a code, let's say we want to print something in the console that I am the first line, okay, and let's say that I want to run a function after this. Okay, so let's name the function as my func. The function it's print something or maybe calculate something. Okay, so it's taking this as an example, and then we call the function. What do we expect from our functions? What do we expect from the code is this console log should be printed and the function call would print this console, right? So let's just write it here and import a file. Okay, and let's try to run it in our browser. Now I have used this file. Okay, so let's try to run this and let's see the input. Okay, so if we check our console. Okay, so it says that I'm the first line, which was our line number one, and skip JS at line number five is printing 11, so which was our second console, right? Which is in the function. Now we see that the lines are executed one by one. So this is what synchronicity means. Okay, so whatever code is there, it is executed in the sequence that is present in our code. Now let's talk about asynchronous. Now talking about asynchronous functions. So we have functions, for example. So let's name it async functions. So we have a functions. One of the function is set timeout. Okay. So let's see how it is working. Now set timeout function receives a callback. Callback is basically a function itself which is running based on an event. Okay. Now the set timeout accepts a function and the time in millisecond after which the function has to be executed. Let's say that we want to console log over here that I'm in the set timeout. Okay, so I want to run this function after 2 seconds. Okay, and then I want to make this function call. Now this function call is called after the set timeout with 2 second of delay. So let's see what we are getting in the console. Okay, so we see that after 2 seconds, 2 or just more than 2 seconds, we are getting this console printed, which is in the set timeout. Now, let's change this a bit. Okay, let's make it a zero delay. Let's try it now. So we see that even though there is zero delay, we are getting set timeout printed after my function call. But if I have a close look at my code, I have this as the first line. Then I have this set timeout with zero delay should print the console, but that is not the case, right? So at line number 18, there is a function call which is printing this console. Okay. Now, why this is exactly happening if we do not have any delay? So here comes the part of asynchronous JavaScript. There are some functions which are considered as async functions. Okay. So there are some functions which are considered as async functions. So before we move to async function, what is asynchronous functions? Any potential blocking operation. So any potential blocking operation is considered as any potential blocking operation is considered as asynchronous operation in JavaScript. Now, JavaScript has a different way to handle these functions. Okay, so there is a different way to handle these kind of functions. Okay, now in order to in order to handle these functions, we have something called as we have something called as event loop in JavaScript. Okay, how does this work? So let's see that part. Now, talking about event loop, from other programming languages, we already know that whenever the functions are running, they are in the execution stack. Execution stack is something where our running or pending functions reside. Okay. So if I have a close look at my code, I see that I have a console on the first line. Then there is a function. This is a set timeout function which I'm having, and finally I am making the function call. Okay, so function will only be loaded into the execution stack, either it's running or in the pending state. Now the first line for the console is going to be running. Okay, so first line is loaded in the stack with console log. Now, as per the code, the second thing which has to run is our set timeout. So console log enters to the stack, it prints it, and the function is done. So we get the first function completed. Now, once this is done, the set timeout comes into the stack. Now, set timeout is identified to be a async function, also a browser API. Now, what is a browser API? So browser provide functionality like delaying of this function, handling of the callback for the set timeout. So whenever set timeout is loaded to the stack, it gets popped out from here. Now it's work of the browser. Now the browser processes, handles the delay. Okay, so this is our stack. This is our browser. Now browser is handling the set timeout. So whatever delay is there, let's say 2 second, browser is waiting for it. Now, delay is completed, whenever the delay is completed, our callback function, which we passed as the first argument to set timeout, which we passed here, the arrow function is the callback we are having, and the callbacks are the ways how we handle the asynchronous function. Okay, so callback runs whenever the operation is completed. Okay, so in our case, set timeout. So we are delaying the operation. Okay, so the callback function, so after 2 seconds the browser loads the callback function to another memory which is called as event queue. So we notice that our callback function, let's call it cb1, is not being loaded to the stack directly. Instead, the callback, the arrow function which we had, is coming to the event queue. So till now, till this process, our callback isn't complete yet. So it just loaded. It's yet to be like running. Okay. Now after so so till this process is going on, at line number 18, my function call has took place. So my func call has took place. So that is a synchronous function call which gets loaded directly to the stack. Okay. And after the function call is done, after the function is completed, since it's a async function, it won't go to the event queue by following this process. So it will directly print the thing. So first my console running was running. Third, my function call is executed. Now it comes the part of it comes the so we come at a point where our stack is empty, where our execution stack is empty, and we have no more function to run in our code. Now whenever the stack is empty, event loop in JavaScript is designed in such a way that it keeps track of the stack, execution stack, and whenever this is empty, the callback which is present in the event queue is popped out and pushed to the stack and pushed to the stack. This only happens if the stack is empty. It is pushed to the stack, and after this is completed, now since this callback is a synchronous callback, if we check out, it's just an arrow function with a console. So it's a synchronous function which will be running. Okay, and that is to be printed. Okay, so whatever the console is there is printed. Now if we check the order of consoles were: first our normal console, second my function call was there, and third the set timeout was there, which is the same thing we are getting here. The console is there, my func call, which is called after the set timeout, but since due to the event loop thing, we are getting it printed later. Now there is a constant loop going on. Okay, so JavaScript keeps track of this stack. So if there are no functions in the stack, if there are no functions in the stack, it pops the function from the beginning of the queue and puts it to the stack, and that function is running. Again, it checks the stack. If it is empty, it again push any other callback if it is present in the event queue. Now, our event queue follows FIFO principle, first in, first out principle, whereas the stack follows LIFO principle, last in, first out principle. So, whatever the function is added at the top of the stack gets popped out first. Whereas in case of callbacks, let's say there are multiple asynchronous operations. So we have FIFO structure. Whatever goes in first will come out first. So this is how JavaScript is managing async operations with help of callback and event queue taking care of how the code will be executed in runtime. So this is how like things are happening. Okay, let's see one more example for this one. Let's have two more callbacks. Maybe async functions would be the good term. Okay, so let's have one more set timeout over here. So let's put the delay of 1 millisecond. So I'm in the set timeout with 1 millisecond delay. Okay, so I'm adding one more set timeout over here with more with 1 second delay, and just after this I'm having this. Okay, so let's put our my func call over here. Okay, let's save this. go to the browser, let's run our code. Okay, let me clean this first. Okay, I will refresh this. Okay, so we see that I'm the first line, then 11, then I'm in the set timeout with 1 millisecond delay, and I'm in the set timeout. So we see that the delay is 1 millisecond for this function, and for this function it is 0 millisecond, although this is getting printed in the first place and this is printed afterwards, because whatever be the delay, it doesn't matter, the order matters, how the callbacks are pushed to the event queue. So the callback orders matters. It The order of code in case of async function does not matter. So this is what it is happening. So this is pushed into the queue first and this is pushed into the queue later. That is why this is running first even with 1 millisecond of delay. So all these things are taken care by our event loop. So yeah, that's all for event loop. I hope we are getting the point, like how async function is managed and what is basically a async function. So some more examples can be a network call. Let's say a network call is one of an example. The database, so we are handling cases with database, so that can be one example. Okay, so these are potential blocking operations. Okay, thank you.